UNIFIL's safety has been repeatedly affected by hostilities, including 2 deadly attacks that killed 3 peacekeepers and injuring many others. China strongly condemns the attacks against UNIFIL. We express deep condolences over the deaths of Indonesian peacekeepers who were killed in the attacks and heartfelt sympathies to the injured. Any deliberate attack on UN peacekeepers is a serious violation of international humanitarian law and Security Council Resolution 1701. Such attacks are absolutely unacceptable and must stop at once. We highly commend UNIFIL for remaining at their posts amid hostilities and urge the parties concerned to take concrete measures to ensure the safety and freedom of movement of UNIFIL and to conduct serious investigations into and seek accountability for all attacks on peacekeepers. China respects the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Lebanon and stands ready to work with the international community to make unremitting efforts to help de-escalate tensions between Lebanon and Israel and restore peace and stability in Lebanon and the Middle East. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
President, we are grateful to USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix and Tom Fletcher and also ASG Khaled Hirari for their comprehensive briefings on the situation in Lebanon, which are very concerning also. The nigh-on month of military escalation along the Blue Line and beyond is affecting not only our friends, the Lebanese people, but also peacekeepers of UNIFIL deployed in the south of the country. A clear and at the same time tragic confirmation of this is the death of 3 UNIFIL personnel in the last 48 hours and the injuring of several others. We express our sincere condolences to the families of the victims and we wish a swift recovery to the injured peacekeepers. From what we can ascertain, according to comments from the leadership of the UN and UNIFIL, the investigation into what happened in the south of Lebanon is ongoing. We trust that the UN Secretariat will soon receive comprehensive information on this, including on who carried out this flagrant attack. Russia decisively condemns all attacks on UNIFIL troops, whoever the perpetrator was. We support the calls of the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres to parties to the conflict to comply with the norms of international law and guarantee the security of blue helmets. We strongly believe in the need for a swift ceasefire in the Lebanon-Israel border area. Otherwise, this heinous spike in violence in the south of Lebanon won't be the last fatal incident affecting UN staff. President, another dangerous trend in recent days has been the deliberate targeting by the IDF of the media, reporting on the ground in the area of the Lebanese-Israel clashes. According to information we've received on the 28th of March as a result of a strike from an Israeli drone in the region of the Jezin, a famous journalist from the television channel Al-Manar was killed, Ali Shuyaib, and also his colleagues from Al-Mayadin channel, Fatima and Mohammed Fatouni. Earlier on the 19th of March in the south of Lebanon, as a result of a missile attack by the Israeli Air Force, a camera crew from Russia Today were injured. The targeted strike was carried out directly close to where they were filming, where there were no military objects, which is clearly confirmed because the camera operator was able to film the detonation of the ammunition. We see this kind of action by Israel and its military to be a grave violation of international law and a deliberate hindrance to the work of the media. We demand a painstaking investigation into this incident by the Israeli authorities and for the perpetrators to be held accountable and for this kind of incident not to be allowed to happen again. President, We, like the majority of the people in this room, are very concerned about the intensification of hostilities of Israel in Lebanon, including daily exchange of fire and the consequences of this for both parties to the conflict, the destruction of critical civilian infrastructure. For the time while we are discussing the incident with UNIFIL, Israel has carried out a new powerful air strike in Beirut. I'd like to recall once again that the root cause of this escalation in the Lebanese-Israel confrontation is the aggression of Washington and West Jerusalem against Iran, which was the tripwire for a broader destruction of the fragile stability in the Middle East. Unfortunately, many members of the Security Council are stubbornly silent about this and continue to try to place all responsibility exclusively on the Lebanese pushback, presenting it as the main culprit for the spike of violence along the Blue Line. At the same time, they stay quiet about the many violations of Israel's regime of the ceasefire over the last year and a half. This one-sided approach by a host of states, including those directly involved in the current vast regional war, clearly is not helping normalize the situation in the region. On the contrary, it is spurring on warring parties to escalate the conflict. As a result, we are seeing a rising civilian death toll and large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure. In Lebanon alone, since the 2nd of March, as a result of IDF action, almost 1,500 people have died. The number of injured people is nearing 4,000, and more than 1 million Lebanese people have become IDPs. Israel's strikes on medicine facilities in Arab republics has become an everyday occurrence. Against this backdrop, we are hearing louder and louder militaristic rhetoric from Western Jerusalem, including orders from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to expand the so-called buffer zone in south of Lebanon, illegally under control of the IDF. President, we reaffirm our commitment of our country to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We call on the leadership of Israel to refrain from using purely military means to address their legitimate security concerns, to withdraw their army units from occupied territories, and to return to the path of diplomacy. A key benchmark for parties should remain to ensure that to fully honour their obligations under Security Council Resolution 1701 and other decisions of the Council, including those that provide the parameter for the activities of UNIFIL, which continue, despite threats to their security, they are remaining in their positions and paying with their lives to implement the UN mandate bestowed upon them to stabilize the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, I thank the Presidency for organising this meeting and Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, Mr. Khaled Khiari, Assistant Secretary General for Middle East, and Mr. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you all for your briefings. President, the official reports and recent information confirm an alarming deterioration of the security and humanitarian situation in Lebanon. In our last statement, my delegation warned that the situation required an urgent international response in order to avoid precisely the situation that we're facing today. Against this backdrop, Colombia reiterates its appeal to all parties to fully respect international law, including the provisions of the United Nations Charter, international humanitarian law, and relevant resolutions of the Security Council, in particular Resolution 1701. There can be no sustainable solution without respecting these frameworks. This is why it's essential to return to the peaceful means of settling disputes and putting an end to the use of force, including the illegal occupation of Lebanese territory by Israel. The humanitarian crisis that Lebanon is experiencing today is not unrelated to the omission and the systemic violation of these principles. My delegation therefore condemns the repeated attacks against civilian infrastructure, health facilities, and the forced displacement resulting from Israeli armed actions, and the land incursions that are contrary to the provisions of Resolution 1701. Colombia launches an appeal to put a halt to all actions that are incompatible with the obligation to protect civilians and to guarantee the required international support, including sufficient and sustainable financing to provide assistance on the ground and to mitigate the impact of the hostilities on the civilian population. My delegation also underscores that accountability must be guaranteed for those responsible, because it is only with justice that we can avoid a fresh outbreak of violence. At the same time, the security of the organisation's personnel and the inviolability of its facilities must be guaranteed at all times by all parties. Colombia expresses its condolences to the victims and their families, as well as to the government of Indonesia. To them, to their families, and to all members of the organisation, in particular staff serving on the ground, we thank all of them for their service to the cause of peace. Mr. President, Colombia reiterates its solidarity with the Lebanese people. Similarly, we underscore that the respect for sovereignty, political independence and the territorial integrity of Lebanon are not negotiable. In this context, my delegation welcomes the decisions adopted by the Lebanese government over recent weeks with a view to containing the effects of the escalation of hostilities and to move to recover the legitimate monopoly over arms. At the same time, we launch an appeal to all parties to halt all actions that may block these efforts. Mr. President, the current situation in Lebanon is not happening in a vacuum. Addressing the humanitarian crisis without clarity over the causes that fuel it, or seeking an end to confrontations without taking into account the broader regional dynamics, is not only an incomplete approach, but is also an insufficient response given the grave time we are currently in. Colombia considers that the Council will hardly be able to fully carry out its responsibilities as long as it continues relying on partial and selective approaches to address a crisis of this magnitude. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
السيد الرئيس.
Mr. President, I would like to take this opportunity as we convene the Council's final meeting for the month of March to express our thanks to the Presidency of the United States of America for its efficient and capable management of the Council's work throughout this month. We also thank France for its swift response to the dangerous escalations in southern Lebanon and for requesting the convening of this meeting. We further appreciate the comprehensive briefings presented by Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, USG for Peace Operations, Mr. Khaled Khayari, Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East and Asia, and USG Tom Fletcher, Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. We thank them for their comprehensive briefings. We also welcome the participation of all permanent representatives in today's session. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain strongly condemns the attack targeting United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, which resulted in the killing of 3 of its personnel and the injury of 5 others. Bahrain affirms that targeting peacekeepers constitutes a blatant violation of international law and of Security Council's resolutions. The Kingdom extends its sincere condolences and sympathy to the families of the victims, to the government of Indonesia and to the United Nations, and wishes the injured speedy recovery. The Kingdom also stresses that ensuring the safety and security of peacekeepers is a responsibility shared by all parties and underscores the necessity of respecting UNIFIL's mandate and enabling the mission to carry out its duties without hindrance. We emphasize the importance of keeping Lebanon away and neutral from regional conflicts and reject any attempts to drag Lebanon into such confrontations. The Kingdom reaffirms its steadfast position in support of the sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity of Lebanon and highlights the need to empower the Lebanese state institutions to exercise full authority over all its territory in a manner that safeguards national security and stability and fulfills the aspirations of the Lebanese people. In this context, we value the steps recently taken by the Lebanese government, which demonstrate a clear seriousness in working to ensure state monopoly of weapons and to ensure weapons stay in the hands of the legitimate institutions, including measures related to disarming the so-called Hezbollah. The Kingdom also expresses its appreciation for the Lebanese government's explicit stance in rejecting and condemning the attacks carried by Hezbollah, which threaten Lebanon's stability and represent a dangerous escalation in the region, as well as for the Lebanese government's efforts to impose an immediate ban on all security and military activities associated with the group. We also welcome the announcement by the Lebanese leadership of its intention to engage in internationally mediated negotiations with Israel to reach an immediate ceasefire. This reflects a sense of national responsibility and a desire to spare Lebanon further escalation. Mr. President, in this context, the Kingdom of Bahrain condemns any escalation that could widen the scope of confrontations and turn them into a full-scale regional conflict. We also condemn any violations of the ceasefire agreement. We condemn the expansionist-oriented Israeli statements and warns of the dangers of any ground incursions that may undermine Lebanese sovereignty, threaten its security and safety, cause civilian casualties, exacerbate humanitarian conditions, and trigger large-scale displacement. All these developments carry grave implications for regional stability. The Kingdom stresses the need for full adherence to the international law and international humanitarian law, particularly in terms of the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure, ensuring the unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance. Mr. President, Bahrain affirms that supporting the Lebanese armed forces and the internal security forces, strengthening their capabilities remains a cornerstone for preserving Lebanon's stability and safeguarding its sovereignty and security. This requires intensified international efforts to provide the necessary support enabling these institutions to perform their duties effectively, especially in southern Lebanon. In conclusion, the Kingdom of Bahrain reaffirms that preserving Lebanon's unity, stability and sovereignty is a collective responsibility. It calls on all parties to abide by the relevant international resolutions, foremost among them Security Council Resolution 1701 of 2006, and to work urgently toward consolidating the ceasefire and preventing further escalation. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I thank USG Lacroix, ASG Chiari, and USG Fletcher for briefing us today. The United Kingdom strongly condemns the recent attacks on UNIFIL, including those which caused the deaths of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers and injured Polish peacekeepers. Our thoughts are with the families of the deceased and with the injured. Such attacks are unacceptable. We urge all parties to ensure the safety and security of UNIFIL personnel and premises in accordance with international law. I thank all peacekeepers serving in Lebanon for their dedication, bravery and professionalism. Many of us here had the opportunity to meet them during our visit to Lebanon in December. President, the UK is clear in its condemnation of Hezbollah's decision to join Iran's attacks against Israel. Hezbollah's attacks on Israel, including civilian communities south of the Blue Line, must cease immediately. The actions of this proscribed terrorist group, at the instigation of the Iranian regime, are once again drawing the people of Lebanon into a conflict they do not want and which is not in their interests. I commend the Lebanese government's decision to ban all Hezbollah military activity and initiate a plan to bring all weapons under state control. We will continue to support the Lebanese armed forces as they undertake this task, as Lebanon's sole legitimate defender. However, Israel's decision to expand its ground operations further into Lebanon undermines this work and threatens Lebanon's sovereignty. Strikes on Lebanese armed forces positions are also deeply concerning. President, as we've heard here, the conflict is causing a deepening crisis with dire consequences for civilians. The humanitarian toll is staggering. More than 1 million people have been forced from their homes, with women and children facing the greatest risks. Among the displaced are over 12,000 pregnant women, many struggling to access essential health care. At least 121 children have been killed, and countless others are enduring the trauma of violence, loss, and upheaval. Attacks impacting healthcare facilities have intensified, with more than 50 health workers killed to date. This is unacceptable. All parties to the conflict must uphold international humanitarian law. Civilians and critical infrastructure must be protected and humanitarian access enabled. The United Kingdom has provided $12 million in support of the government of Lebanon's efforts to reach vulnerable communities. We stand with those working tirelessly to protect civilians and deliver life-saving assistance. And finally, President, we support the urgent need for direct negotiations between the governments of Israel and Lebanon. This is the only path towards lasting peace and security for people both sides of the Blue Line. Both Israel and Lebanon want to see an end to Hezbollah's ability to threaten the region. Further expansion of this conflict will only repeat the cycle of violence across the Blue Line and drag the region further into crisis. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement. I will now give a statement in my capacity as a representative of the United States. And colleagues, I too thank you. I thank our briefers for their thorough updates, and I thank France for convening this urgent meeting. And we too mourn the loss of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers on March 29th and 30th, and we do extend our heartfelt condolences to their families, to their loved ones. And colleagues, we honor their sacrifice in the service of international peace and security. We also wish a full and swift recovery to the other UNIFIL peacekeepers who were injured. Colleagues, one of those that we mourn is Private First Class Ramadan. Just 28 years old, Private Ramadan was still at the dawn of his career. His company was due to return very soon to Indonesia, where the young husband and father would be reunited with his 2-year-old daughter, Shania. His last communication with his family was a simple red heart, an emoji. I've worked personally with many junior soldiers like him, and I think the Indonesian press got it right from everything that I've read about him when they called him a, quote, young warrior in training. But unfortunately, this young warrior died while keeping the peace. He was a young father, a young soldier, thousands of miles from home, who trusted that this council would deploy him where he would be most effective. Colleagues, peacekeepers endure exceptional dangers to prevent conflict and protect civilians. Their safety and security must be respected by all parties at all times. And that is why I ask this Council and the watching world to pause and to reserve judgment until the United Nations can fully investigate and fully assess the circumstances of these tragic incidences, even as we share in the shock and sorrow of this loss. I say again, the media, the world watching, and this Council should pause and allow the United Nations to fully investigate and assess the circumstances of these incidences. Again, on a personal note, as a soldier, now turned diplomat, that has commanded coalition troops, we all know the dangers that exist when we accept these missions. But in contrast here, the peacekeepers that this body sends to conflict zones are often surprised by the very real perils that they face. Countries like Indonesia send their sons and daughters to support the UN mission of peace. They're not sending them to fight a war. This Council owes them condolences, but we also owe them a wise approach to peacekeeping that recognizes that terrorists have no respect for this Council. Terrorists have no respect for the norms of international law. Colleagues, we all recognize that the suffering in this region is immense and has gone on for far too long. Parents, children, and grandparents, whether Israeli or Lebanese, whether civilians or UN peacekeepers, they should not face the daily dangers caused by Iranian-backed terrorists who have long afflicted both Israel and Lebanon. The people in this region deserve a different future, one defined by security and economic opportunity and normal life, not by rockets, tunnels, and the constant threat of escalation and retaliation. We must support the government of Lebanon and the Lebanese armed forces as they exercise sovereignty, and we've heard a lot of talk about sovereignty today, but as they exercise sovereignty, the duly elected government of Lebanon, over all of Lebanon's territory and beat back Hezbollah, a group that hides behind civilians while threatening their neighbors, a terrorist group that has a long history of hiding weapons, fighters, and caches of rockets in schools and hospitals and civilian homes. Hezbollah also has a long history of attacking peacekeepers and of firing on Israeli civilians from proximity of UNIFIL and peacekeeping positions, inviting retaliation for their own propaganda aims. Colleagues, since 1978, over 300 UNIFIL peacekeepers have been killed and this is in this mission, and this is why this Council must think very carefully about the effectiveness of this effort. We can help refocus international efforts on supporting Lebanese state institutions, reducing risk to peacekeepers, and pressing Hezbollah and Iran to cease their destabilizing activities. We, the United States, will continue to work with Council members, regional partners, troop contributing countries, and the parties on the ground to reduce tensions, support Lebanon's sovereignty, and make a better future for the Lebanese people. I thank you. I will resume my duties as President of the Council, and under Rule 37, I invite the representative of Lebanon. I give the floor to the representative of Lebanon.
Mr. President, Lebanon firmly and unequivocally condemns the attacks targeting UNIFIL, which threaten the security and safety of its mission and personnel. Lebanon stresses the need for full respect of UNIFIL's mandate by all parties and for ensuring its security and safety, the inviolability of its premises, the freedom of movement and all measures that facilitate the performance of its duties in accordance with international law and relevant Security Council resolutions. The attacks on peacekeepers are attacks on this Council itself. They undermine its reputation and credibility before the peoples of the world. These barbaric and irresponsible acts must stop, regardless of who is responsible. It is the legal and moral responsibility of this Council to identify and hold accountable those responsible. It is worth noting that this force and the troop contributing countries have embodied the highest values of sacrifice, past and present. Who among us does not recall Israel's deliberate targeting of UNIFIL's headquarters in Qana in 1996, and its threats and demanding that UNIFIL leaves its area of operations in 2024. Today, we meet following the killing of 3 soldiers from the Indonesian battalion and the injury of others, one of whom is of Polish nationality, knowing that this was preceded by attacks on the Ghanaian and Nepalese battalions. Mr. President, on behalf of the government of Lebanon, I extend condolences to Indonesia, its government and its people, and the families of the soldiers. We wish a swift recovery to the injured and commend the sacrifices of the Indonesian battalion and all participating forces in contributing to security and stability in Lebanon. Today, we reaffirm Lebanon's commitment to UNIFIL more than ever. We emphasize the importance of preserving the unity of the contributing forces and ensuring their continued participation. We also reiterate our gratitude to the force commander and all the mission personnel. Mr. President, the price the Lebanese people are paying as a result of this conflict is heavy and exhausting. They, the Lebanese people, did not choose this war. It was imposed upon them. Israel has never respected the cessation of hostilities and has continued its violations of Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity and its deliberate attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, Hezbollah unilaterally decided to enter into a war at a time when the Lebanese government was open to dialogue that could have led to sustainable political solutions and provided a framework for addressing outstanding issues. Mr. President, the humanitarian catastrophe is escalating amid ongoing Israeli attacks, which to date have killed 1,247 Lebanese and injured 3,680, including children, women, paramedics, relief workers, and journalists, many in direct strikes that constitute a blatant violation of international law, international humanitarian law, and the Geneva Conventions. These attacks have displaced more than 1.2 million Lebanese from their towns and villages in a process of mass forced displacement. Israel continues to flatten towns and villages and to carry out large-scale incursions into Lebanese territory, accompanied by calls for establishing security belts and buffer zones, alongside serious threats to Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity. These actions constitute clear violations of international law, of the UN Charter, and of the jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice. We recall here a letter we sent you yesterday regarding the statements by the Israeli Ministers of Defense and Finance announcing the Israeli army's intention to occupy southern Lebanon up to the Litani River and to consider the river as Israel's new border. We call upon this Council to act immediately and to condemn these statements clearly and explicitly, and to take the necessary measures to compel Israel to halt its incursions and threats to Lebanon's territorial integrity and political independence, to withdraw its forces to internationally recognized borders, and to comply with the UN Charter and relevant international resolutions, including the Resolution 1701 and the cessation of hostilities. Mr. President, in the same vein, we strongly condemn the threats by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to target American universities in the Middle East, which has forced the American University of Beirut and the Lebanese American University to evacuate their campuses and shift to remote teaching. We call on Iran, which repeatedly calls before this esteemed Council to respect the sovereignty of states and non-interference in their internal affairs. We call on Iran to respect Lebanon's sovereignty and sovereign decisions and to cease interfering in its internal affairs. Mr. President, Lebanon and its people sought to rebuild the state and its institutions and to implement the required reforms. The government had indeed initiated this process, alongside with extending the state's authority across the entire country and restricting weapons to legitimate state institutions. Recognizing that nations cannot live in isolation, the government chose to open up to its regional surroundings based on a principled approach that preserved rights and grounded in the belief that sustainable solutions cannot be achieved through force but through peaceful means. In contrast, Israel has continued to undermine the credibility of the government through its ongoing violations and serious threats of occupation and its disregard for the UN Charter, international law and international humanitarian law. The question that begs to be asked today is, did Israel achieve security after its occupation of Lebanon in 1978? Can security or stability be achieved through military solutions without negotiations? Modern history, Mr. President, and Israel should have learned this as well, modern history has taught us that lasting security and stability and sustainable peace will not be achieved through prolonged wars, protracted conflicts, or occupation. The time has come to draw lessons from the past once and for all. Only a diplomatic solution can guarantee lasting security and stability and ultimately a just peace. Diplomatic initiatives are already on the table, and the time has come to seize them. Let violence stop now. This is your responsibility and your duty. Every day that passes in this conflict undermines your credibility and the credibility of the United Nations as a whole. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President.